There's an article out today in the Huffington Post which outlines how Jeb Bush is attempting to distance himself from his brother, who of course was a massive failure, and he's doing that while at the same time proposing the same policies. So in other words, he's saying I'm distancing myself from my brother, but he's not actually doing it. So his actions do not line up with his words, which is perhaps not surprising for somebody who's a member of the Bush family. So they focus primarily on the issue of foreign policy, and they say, quote, Bush stressed that he would devise his own way forward, but plenty of his foreign policies invite comparisons, not contradictions, with those of his neoconservative brother George W. Bush and his father George H.W. Bush. One reason for this could be that Jeb Bush has consulted many of the same advisors his father and brother relied on to help them craft foreign policy while each other was in office. So, let's take a step back here and be kind in our interpretation for a second to the Republicans, because what this is also pulling in Obama. And what I mean by that is Obama said, hey, I'm going to do change. Hey, we're going to take the country in a different direction. And he brought in all of the corporatist Clinton advisors left over from Bill's term. So Obama did it, but now Jeb Bush is essentially doing the same thing, except with Jeb, it's way worse. Now, why do I say that? They continue, quote, Paul Wolfowitz and Jeb Bush have held similar foreign policy ideas since at least 1997, when they were both signatories to a set of principles devised by the conservative Project for the New American Century, which were described by the group as a Reaganite policy of military strength and moral clarity. Other signatories include former Vice President Dick Cheney and former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. So, now understand what that means. That means that he might come out and say all these different things about how I'm my own man. That's another literal quote he had. He said, I'm my own man on these issues. In other words, don't compare me to my brother. Meanwhile, all of these guys signed on to the same basic philosophy and same basic idea laid out in the Project for a New American Century, which is the idea of we are the world policemen and it should be that way. So you could say anything you want to say, but your actions show that you're exactly like Paul Wolfowitz and Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and George W. Bush, so all the talky-talky is meaningless. So understand that, because that's very important. He did policy papers with the neocons where he agreed with their doctrine. But if all that isn't enough, we have quotes from Bush from today. Quote, America does not have the luxury of withdrawing from the world. Our security, our prosperity, and our values demand that we remain engaged and involved in often distant places. We have no good reason to apologize for our leadership and our interest in serving the cause of global security, global peace, and human freedom. He continues, having a military that is equal to any threat makes it less likely that we will need to put our men and women in uniform in harm's way. Fundamentally, weakness invites war, and strength encourages peace. Need I say any more about how he's exactly like George W. Bush? Now, also, let's zero in here a little bit more. Because he said, well, having a military that is equal to any threat makes it less likely we'll need to actually fight a war. So you're saying you just want an equal military? Because if you want an equal military, I got news for you. You're going to have to cut the thing by like 70%. So let's take a look at these charts. We've seen these before. This one is discretionary spending. 57% of discretionary spending is military spending. So this idea that, well, come on, we need to increase military spending. That's what we need to do. How? How can you increase it more than that? I mean, we're already at the point that's madness. I mean, that's psychotic. But the neoconservatives do want to increase it. Let's look at this next one here. This one is perhaps even more telling. This is military spending, the United States versus the rest of the world. We blow everybody away. So you know what, Jeb? Okay, I'll take you at your word, man. You want to have a U.S. military that's equal to any other threat? Great. So cut it to what it would be if it was China or Russia. do you realize how much more we spend on military than all these other countries? I mean, we basically spend more than what? About the next dozen countries combined, and most of them are our allies. So this idea of we're constantly under threat and be afraid and be scared and all these terrible things happening in the world, increase military spending. Well, you see the numbers, man. You guys see it right there. You tell me if it looks like we should increase it. Now understand, as I've said multiple times on the air before, I'm in favor of having the strongest military in the world. I really am. That doesn't bother me. That's fine. But we could still cut the military by 50% and have the biggest military in the world by far. So make no mistake about it. Jeb Bush is not in favor of a defensive policy and a defensive strategy. He's in favor, just like George W. Bush, his brother, and all the neocons, he wants an offensive policy. And take his word for it, not mine.